Another day. Die another day.
Inside Die Another Day is a 75-minute long documentary covering the production of, funnily enough, Die Another Day. It is directed by one of the most acclaimed making-of documentarians out there, Charles de Lauzirika, and features a plethora of interviews, behind-the-scenes footage, and revealing candid moments from the shooting of the film. When it was first released, it was the showcase extra feature of Die Another Day's initial home media release, one of the most significant making-ofs produced for any Bond film DVD release at that time. So, why is it currently rotting away in a vault? Why has this impressive showcase of the production of one of the biggest Bond movies ever seemingly been lost to time?
What the hell is this all about?
For a long while, we Bond fans were feasting when it came to James Bond on home media. Of course, the series has been around long enough to cover the lengths and breadths of formats, VHS, Betamax, Laserdisc, but the special edition DVDs are the releases that I have the most fondness and nostalgia for. I really need to get around to making a whole video talking about these things someday, but the bespoke interactive menus and special features for each of the then 20 Bond films are just like seared into my brain. I watched them that much. And yeah, these things were stacked with extras, commentaries, promotional material, photo galleries, deleted scenes in some cases. But the highlight of the extras packages for me were always the phenomenal inside documentaries. From Dr. No through to License to Kill, these features, averaging between around 30 to 40 minutes, would run through the production history and details of each of the films through interviews with the cast, crew, and the ever-soothing tones of narrator Patrick Macnee keeping things on track.
Just a wisp of fire caught in a freak moment, like a cloud that takes the shape of an animal. But for filmmakers, it seems to be an omen. Indeed, the hand of fate does reach out and touch James Bond.
You know, if I could have any voice narrating my life, it would probably be Patrick Macnee's. Good evening, Mr. Bond fans. I know I'm not alone in my love of the Inside documentary series. They were directed by John Cork, and each was clearly produced with a great deal of care and love for each of the respective films they were covering. Even 25 years or more on from when they were originally produced, they are still some of the most comprehensive and informative documentaries about the making of this incredible series. GoldenEye Tomorrow Never Dies and The World's Not Enough were sadly not graced with an inside documentary, presumably because there were just other features from the times that they could use instead to cover the making of bases. But it's not the same, is it? I mean, sure, I like a Liz Hurley hosted clip show as much as the next guy, but I don't think it's really much of a substitute for a proper documentary on the making of GoldenEye that goes into the nitty-gritty of the filmmaking process. So I was disappointed with the initial extras packages for those films, which substituted documentaries for TV-produced fluff pieces, and even at the tender age of 11, I had given up hope of there ever being more inside documentaries.
Hope springs eternal.
Now on DVD. Brosnan.
Let's get down to business.
Barry.
I'm a girl that just doesn't like to get tied down.
Bond.
James Bond.
Die Another Day. The 2-disc special edition DVD. Own it today.
And then the DVD gods answered my prayers with the 2-disc special edition release of Die Another Day. At that point, the most impressive feature-laden release for any Bond film on DVD. As well as 2 audio commentaries and a trivia track on disc 1, the film's second disc sports a really impressive array of features, and looking back on it today, I can't believe we used to have it so good with these things. Multi-angle presentations, storyboards, bespoke equipment briefings with voiceover, a feature on the making of the music video, a feature on the making of the Nightfire video game, a feature on the subject of digital grading. I didn't even know what that was at the time, and I was devouring all of these features, and I learned an awful lot about filmmaking, quite honestly, from these extras. There was even an Easter egg featuring the raw footage of Halle Berry emerging from the ocean, which I'm sure was a very well-traversed feature for many once they discovered it, but the showcase documentary of the whole package was, of course, Inside Die Another Day. A 75-minute long continuation of the Inside making of series, except this time it's being directed by Charles de Lauzirika, the filmmaker behind the incredible making of documentaries on the Alien films, as well as a whole host of other movies. Blade Runner, he's someone along with John Cork, along with Laurent Bouzereau, who, if their names are on a making of, I know I am in for a good time. So if anyone was going to fill in for John Cork on this particular occasion, then I'm glad it's Charles de Lauzirika. That being said, Inside Die Another Day is a very different beast to the John Cork-produced series. This was not made retrospectively in the years subsequent to the film's release. This is mostly comprised of on-set interviews and behind-the-scenes footage from the set. The documentary is divided into 7 segments, each covering a different aspect of the filmmaking process. In some ways, it feels much more fly-on-the-wall than any of the other inside features do as a result. It kinda skips a lot of the pre-production elements of filmmaking as well, like writing, casting, and so on. Instead, just throws the viewers right into the start of shooting with the first segment. So the thing opens with a really nicely edited intro piece, and then it's right into the filming of the surfing sequence that begins Die Another Day. It has a lot of really impressive footage of the shoot, and even touches on an element of the sequence that was presumably abandoned at some point during the production.
Surfers don't like to fall off waves, and we had to have, the story has to have two guys falling off and one guy making it, and it was very difficult to get the guys to fall off these waves, not only because it's really dangerous, but because they don't like to do it. They're not conditioned to do it. It's not in their bloodstream, if you will.
In the film, of course, Bond makes it to the shore with both of his surfing allies, so woohoo for the nameless agents, you both survived, congratulations, only to die via a fiery explosion a few minutes later, of course, but still! I seriously wish we had this footage in HD because it's beyond impressive, and I love this little feature as a great reminder of how much time, effort, and expertise go into creating what amounts to, frankly, a few seconds of screen time. Next up is a segment focusing on the Hovercraft chase sequence, and more action. It features this really helpful breakdown from director Lee Tamahori as to the distinction between the different film units working on a Bond film.
The main unit shoots the actors, and we have to shoot the drama, and we shoot some small-scale action, fist fights, shoot 'em up, so things like that. Bond runs down corridor, the walls blow up behind him, stuff like that. When it gets into massive action involving vehicles, aircraft, underwater, that's when the action units come into it.
This segment features a lot more of star Pierce Brosnan too, and touches on the moment that he injured himself on set and how the production was affected. It's not a super technical look at the filming of the sequence, and it's a pretty short segment in all honesty, but still, loads of really nice behind-the-scenes shots.
Amazing. You can never get me.
Next is a segment focusing on the Cuba sequence of the film, which was filmed in Spain, of course, and there's a good bit focusing on the various hardships, mainly concerning the uncooperative weather conditions and how cold it was, as poor, barely clothed Halle Berry explains.
It has been really cold, and I've been wet in all of my scenes in a little sundress and barefoot, and it's been a little chilly. Yeah, but that's part of it. I remember Lee looked at me one day and he said, "This is what you wanted to do, darling. You signed up." And I said, "Yes, I did, and I love it."
Love this bit of Halle having to do her disrobing bit, and Barbara Broccoli is on hand with a warm robe ready to fling it on her when cut is called. But the weather situation is actually, a very serious issue for the production. Halle Berry mentions at one point how the initial meeting between Jinx and Bond was written differently and had to be adapted due to the less than favorable conditions.
It's when Jinx first meets Bond, so that's a big scene for Pierce and I. And because it's been so cold and rainy, it didn't lend for the romance that scene needed. And it was supposed to be at sunset with wine and very romantic and seductive, and it's just too cold, you can't do it like this. That's not sexy.
And even by shifting the scene to the daytime, it seemed to be touch and go as to whether they'd actually even be able to film it at all. There's a really nice candid bit where executive producer Anthony Way is seemingly having to convince Halle Berry to go along with the shooting of the scene at this particular location.
Yeah, so we called the guy in the American Air Base over there, Rota, and he said, "What's wrong with your website? They keep saying it's thunderstorms and it's rain." And he said, "No," he said, "it's going to be a beautiful day today and tomorrow. It'd be great to do it here if we could, because otherwise, with your stop date, it makes it very difficult back in the studios. We'll have to rebuild the set. Good. Let's do it. All right.
It's so weird to think of how different that whole sequence might have been if they did have to up sticks and film it on the backlot at Pinewood, all because the sun just wouldn't come out for a couple of days. I have to hand it to Halle Berry too. She holds it together really well for those moments, despite it being absolutely freezing by all accounts. I don't think it shows on screen in the final film at all, and hey, if she had to lose a foot to frostbite to get this shot, well, thank you for your services, Ms. Berry. The next segment is focused entirely on the Q branch scene, and this was my absolute favourite portion of the whole documentary when I was a kid. It has comments from the writers and John Cleese himself concerning handling the scene, the importance of it being the first Bond film in many years without Desmond Llewellyn as Q. The documentary even features comments from one of Desmond's sons, Justin.
Well, it was quite interesting because my father, of course, wasn't really sort of successful until the last few Bonds. I mean, he was there, but it was always just a part that came bit by bit. So though we grew up with it, it didn't become the sort of huge, phenomenal world until quite late on. But it was always tremendous fun.
I just love seeing more of the behind-the-scenes stuff from this particular part of the film, all of the old gadgets in the background. I'm a huge John Cleese fan, so hearing about how he perceives the role of Q and the stuff that he struggles with in the dialogue was a lot of fun. Really love this bit. The next couple of segments make for a natural pairing as they cover the Ice Palace and the car chase. For the Ice Palace, it covers the inception of the idea, the building of it, the absolute curveball from Lee Tamahori deciding that he wants the car chase to partially take place within the palace itself, and I love how cavalier production designer Peter Lamont is about the whole thing.
Supposing we had a car chasing there. Well, everything's possible, you know, they meant put it in structural steel.
But the segment is also just really a showcase of Lamont's immense talents. Bond fans will know the name and face well considering how many of the films he worked on and how influential he has been and will continue to be on the future of 007 films. Then for the car chase, it was much the similar situation as in Spain, with it being kind of touch and go as to whether the weather conditions would allow the production to actually film the sequence as intended, here in Iceland, of course. If the previous featurette was a real testament to Peter Lamont's talents, then I think that this is for Vic Armstrong and the whole second unit, because it really is astonishing just seeing the behind the scenes footage of this thing. Like, it's insane that they were even able to accomplish half of what is in the final film. Just one of those nuts old school movie making idea kind of things. Like, yeah, a car chase over an ice lake would be cool, but the amount of energy, money and manpower that goes into achieving what is essentially just a few minutes of screen time is insane. But as someone who cites the ice lake chase as being one of the action highlights of this entire film series, I am eternally grateful that a good few dozen people really worked their asses off to make it happen. Next up are a selection of features covering aspects of Die Another Day's post-production, starting with Rendering Bond, which dedicates its time to a whole bunch of the film's special effects, including the notorious tsunami surfing bit. It has been ridiculed online for decades. Even Pierce Brosnan is on record talking about the ridiculousness of the moment.
Right, Brosnan, we're going to do kite surfing. Tsunamis today. Kite surfing, a tsunami. Oh.
I don't think it's unfair of me to call this one of the most hated on moments of the whole film, perhaps even of the whole James Bond series, and boy, if you ever want to feel bad about ever poking fun at it, then this is the feature for you to watch. Director Lee Tamahori and visual effects supervisor Mara Bryan walk viewers through the process of creating the Ice Wave, as it was known on the production.
The script changed from its very first incarnation, but one sequence that remained right from the very beginning was the Ice Wave. And I could see immediately there was going to be a great deal of digital visual effects involvement.
By far the most unnerving stuff was Bond hanging off an ice wall in a world that didn't exist, which is a computer-generated world. That kind of really sent a lot of us into paroxysms of fear, if you will. My part in it is actually pretty minimal. Hanging Pierce on certain rigs and against blue screens was very easy. The tough part comes in the back end of this once we have to start putting the rest of it in and making it real, because it will either stand or fall on whether this stuff works or not.
Mara then goes on to discuss how much was involved in creating the moment, the immense challenge of producing such a shot with CG at that time, and yeah, it really gives you a great perspective on how much blood and sweat went into making this thing.
The amount of effort that's gone into that very tiny sequence is quite astonishing. One of the biggest challenges of the Ice Wave was that there was nowhere to hide in terms of the look. We were in broad daylight, full sunshine, and we had to create a totally CG environment which consisted entirely of ice, very difficult, water, quite difficult. That was a tremendous challenge.
It does kind of make you feel bad if you've ever made fun of that moment, and Lord knows I have many a time over the year, because hearing someone talk quite proudly about this as their work and what they achieved and how long it took and everything, it does give you a different perspective on it, and I think that that's a valuable and sobering thing to have. And I'm certainly not suggesting that it should be above criticism, because a lot of people spent a lot of time and energy and money working on it, but I do think that it's important to acknowledge, I guess, that yeah, people weren't working on this thing thinking like, oh, isn't this going to be a ridiculous moment that people are going to be making fun of for the rest of the duration of this franchise's existence. Other effects are talked about, including the Diamond satellite, which is a combination of model work and computer effects, and it does indeed look really tremendous in the film, same with a lot of the finale effects work that's covered here. Next we hear from Christian Wagner, editor of the film, and talk is centered around he, and along with input from director Lee Tamahori, sought a more modern approach to the film's cutting.
You know, I think films like The Matrix and John Woo films and Michael Bay, just it's a flurry. It's a flurry of eye candy. I wanted to bring that kind of editing style into the Bond thing to kind of make it a little bit more hip, I guess, is as close as I can get.
This is another interesting feature focused on something that I think is often spoken about more in a derogatory way about the film. I know an awful lot of people have issues with some of the, certainly the Matrix-inspired speed ramps and what have you, but along with the visual effects piece, I do think that these two make an interesting pair, highlighting just how much of the mission objective with Die Another Day was to make the Bond films feel modern.
Christian, my editor, has been cutting it very fast and very progressively modern, and I use that phrase advisedly because I'm always a little hesitant myself about that kind of music video approach to action.
It's an interesting thing because I do feel like Die Another Day is actually one of the more time-capsuled Bond films. Like, in an effort at the time to make the thing feel modern, looking back on it now, more than 20 years later, the film actually feels like quite aggressively early noughties as a result of some of the creative choices made, whereas I would say a film like GoldenEye, on the other hand, yes, I mean, it's dated obviously in terms of the technology that you can see on screen, in terms of the fashion and so on, and yet in terms of the filmmaking techniques, I think it feels timeless in a lot of ways, and as a result is aging better, and this is perhaps, ironically, better than the film which was striving to be modern.
Sometimes the old ways are the best.
Wrapping up the documentary is a final few minutes on the film's music score, with David Arnold making some really wonderful comments at the start of his section, which I think are just so lovely.
I always felt like the best part of a Bond movie is the opening 10 seconds. Because you've got the gun barrel, and for that 10 seconds, potentially the best Bond movie ever made is about to start.
Die Another Day may be a love it or hate it film for many in the fandom, but I think on large, fans are super positive about Arnold's work throughout the series, and his Die Another Day score is absolutely one of my favourite Bond scores of them all, and hearing Arnold talk about his work and his process was really lovely. This was obviously his third Bond film in a row working on, and he touches on the returning nature of his work and the challenge of diversifying despite the films having, you know, similar beats and tropes and so on. This is another of my favourite pieces of the documentary. Arnold is always so eloquent and interesting to listen to. He's clearly a huge fan of the series himself, and it's just a beautiful thing hearing someone talk about what they do, loving what they do. He has a great respect for the material, and he does phenomenal work, so I can only be slightly disappointed when the music section ends abruptly and the documentary wraps up with some final thoughts from the filmmakers.
You know, I grew up watching Bond and sort of fantasizing about being in that world of mystery and intrigue.
Bond used to be the only real event movie. Now there are big blockbusters always being made. But the one thing that the Bond films have is that the hero operates in a world that you'd like to be in.
When I was a kid, everybody talked about the Bond. What's he gonna do next time?
Get recast is what he's gonna do next time, but moving on. It's a bit of an abrupt end to things, certainly, and I don't think that Inside Die Another Day is quite as polished as the John Cork-directed Inside documentaries in terms of shepherding the viewer from concept, pre-production, production, post-production, and release. The structure here is a little more scattershot, but I think what it does cover is still really informative and interesting, and I think I certainly come away with a different appreciation for scenes in Die Another Day. I think of them in different ways. That scene with Halle Berry coming out of the water, for example, and just sort of appreciating that they were even able to capture that on film. Just one example, I think that there's so many really interesting little factoids in the documentary. I think it's a really great piece. So why on earth is the thing relegated to seemingly only ever existing on the special edition DVD, and why wasn't it ported over to future releases of Die Another Day like so many other other Bond extras routinely are. So this is where the lost component of this whole discussion comes in. As I say, Inside Die Another Day was made and released with a 2-disc special edition DVD released in 2003. A mere couple of years later, the first 20 Bond films were re-released on the format as Ultimate Edition DVDs. Every film in the set was now graced with a 2-disc DVD release. Every film porting over the extras from their special edition DVDs, as well as adding new ones to beef up the supplemental packages for all of the films, except for Die Another Day, which for some reason, despite being the only film to previously have a 2-disc DVD set, ended up with less than it had previously. Some new things were added to the package, of course. There's a nice on-location featurette with Peter Lamont doing a voiceover. There's a short feature on the moment in the film where Bond arrives back in London via British Airways, and this bit is most notable for featuring something of a hidden deleted scene from the film.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll shortly be landing. Please return your seats to the upright position.
And then there's Just Another Day, a more substantial additional feature, nearly 23 minutes long in length, which is a bit of a fly-on-the-wall, day in the life of the production kind of thing, specifically on the moment where Gustav Graves arrives in London via parachute in front of Buckingham Palace and all of the logistics that go into place to make such a thing happen. Nice features, don't get me wrong, but hardly a replacement for what was the most substantive extra feature on Die Another Day's initial DVD release. From Script to Screen is a fine feature in its own right. It's a 50-minute documentary, and about half of that is spent on pre-production, and there are some really nice candid moments in the thing from the writers and the producers, but once it gets into the shoot itself, it becomes a bit more sporadic in structure, with the Robert Carlyle narration doing its best to keep things on track. It wraps things up super abruptly, and it kind of feels like the feature was intended to be half an hour longer or something, and they just ran out of time or money, as it covers very little of the post-production process, or indeed much of the shoot, certainly not in as much detail as the Inside documentary does. Written and directed by Rob Dunn. Is that what he said when he just got sick of editing these pieces together? Is that why the whole thing stopped so abruptly? Okay, Rob Dunn. Rob is done with this. I'm kidding, of course, but I do find it slightly strange that this was presumably being made in tandem with Inside Die Another Day. They use some similar behind-the-scenes footage, interview setups, and cover a lot of the same ground, so it is a little odd that they both exist, or were even released on the same package. From Script to Screen has a lot more on the pre-production process, writing and gearing up, whereas Inside starts right with the shoot itself, so the documentaries do complement each other well in that respect, but I'm still slightly amazed that no one had the idea to just, well, merge the two of these things in some way. They do cover some of the very same territory. I mean, focusing on Pierce's knee injury, the bad weather in Spain. They use the same damn clip of Pierce talking about it.
I'm going to cut our losses, go on Wednesday. Yeah. And then they'll figure out whether to come back here or do it in the back lot. There you go.
Now, here's where things get strange again. So, From Script to Screen is billed on the back of my special edition DVD set as being a Region 2 exclusive, and in the age of streaming, this might not be immediately clear to everyone, but what it basically means is that, okay, a lot of major DVDs were region-locked back in the day, and Region 2 basically covered Europe, the Middle East, South Africa, Japan, amongst other places, so if you were buying the 2-disc special edition of Die Another Day outside of those territories, you would not have From Script to Screen included. Bit of a strange thing to deliberately region lock a special feature like that, to the point that I wondered if disc space was an issue in other places, like maybe the discs they were using didn't have as much space as Region 2 discs. Let me know in the comments below if you have any theory as to why this decision might have been made. So if you were getting the Ultimate Edition DVD of the film for the first time and you lived in the United States, for example, From Script to Screen might well have been a whole new documentary for you to enjoy, which is great. Also ported over was a substantial featurette on the car chase called Shaken and Stirred on Ice. It's another piece from Rob Dunn, and another piece that covers a lot of very similar ground and uses the same interview footage that you see in Inside Die Another Day.
So whenever we have a location given to us, we try and get ahead of everybody else, drill some holes. So for example, this morning they wanted to put a camera position near to an iceberg. We send somebody in, they drill a test hole to find out that the ice is thick enough, and as long as within our parameters, are happy for people to work there, and then we do a check around the area to make sure that that particular iceberg doesn't look like it's going to do anything strange.
Again, I just find it quite strange that you have two separate documentarians working on different documentaries, but using a lot of the same source interview footage, behind-the-scenes footage, especially when it's all for the purposes of the same DVD release. And yet, I find it even stranger that you would do that and then not bother to include it as part of a full collection on further releases. Like, ironically enough, from script to screen, once having been a region-locked feature, has seemingly become the de facto Die Another Day making of on the discs as a result of being ported over to the Ultimate Edition DVD and then the Blu-rays that have followed since, and yet, inside Die Another Day, the one that was the standout making of on the initial DVD release worldwide is the forgotten one, languishing away somewhere despite it being the most comprehensive overall account on the making of the film. It's also worth noting here that there was a whole bunch of stuff not ported over to the Ultimate Edition from the Special Edition, the digital grading and title sequence featurettes, the multi-angle stuff, including the Halle Berry Easter egg, the storyboards. I guess the Nightfire making of and trailer I can forgive, as those things were clearly included as promotional elements, but why not include the Madonna music video and making of for that? Ironically enough, the extra features packages for the Ultimate Edition DVD of Die Another Day is far less substantive than what was originally released on the Special Edition DVD. They didn't even port over, like, the film's trailers, and that's just such a strange thing, because all of these films on Ultimate Edition and on the Blu-rays, they put all of the TV spots and trailers and what have you under the Ministry of Propaganda heading, but for some reason didn't do that for Die Another Day. So this all begs the question, why? Why was Inside Die Another Day left behind despite being such a well-produced and valuable documentary when every other film in the set got to keep their making-ofs? As ever with these types of things, it wouldn't surprise me if it was some kind of rights-related issue holding it back from being included, like maybe contracts weren't completely future-proof at the time it was initially made, and rather than go through a complicated legal process to get the thing on the Ultimate Edition and the Blu-rays, they just figured they'd let it go. This is pure speculation on my part, though. There is also just the possibility that whoever was in charge just forgot to do it, and maybe it ended up on the list of cut extras by mistake. Basically, there's every possibility that this was an oversight too. In a world where DVD special features seem to be less and less of a priority for big studios, it's perhaps optimistic of me to hope that Inside Die Another Day should ever accompany a further release of the film on 4K disc, for example. But it's always a bit of a shame when new releases come out and they don't port over, like, absolutely everything from an earlier release, so you still need to keep a hold of your old one if you want the complete package. Which isn't really a problem for me, admittedly, because as you can probably tell by the stuff that's around me, I very seldom let go of anything that's 007 related. Is it weird that I want a making-of documentary about the making-of documentaries of Die Another Day? This video honestly expanded quite a bit when I started to notice all of the similarities throughout the different features produced for the film's various releases, and despite different documentary makers being credited, in a lot of ways it feels like there were multiple people working on slightly different but similar briefs and being provided with a lot of the same material, which accounts for so much of the overlapping. It's frustrating in some ways that there isn't just like one complete making of Die Another Day documentary and that all the best information is kind of spread over multiple different features, and even more frustrating that you need to own multiple different releases to experience all of it, or just hope that someone's YouTube upload of the whole thing remains viewable for posterity, I guess. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Is this a particular pet peeve for anyone else? I cannot be the only one out there to get sort of this into DVD special features, but do let me know in the comment section below. Also below, please click the subscribe button if you have not already subscribed to this channel, and there is of course the Mrs. Bell notification button down there as well, so do click that to stay up to date on future video uploads. And with all that being said, and until next time, Bond fans, so long for now.